Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are unpacking a massive paradigm shift found in Marc Bates's biblical theological commentary on Matthew 18. This section of text is often called the Fourth Discourse, and what's happening here is profound. We see Jesus acting as the greater Moses, handing down authoritative instructions to restore the covenant community. But, and this is key, he isn't just setting up a new religion or replacing ethnic Israel. He is completely inverting how humanity understands power, justice, and community. As we're going to see, the entire foundation of this restored community rests on something totally unexpected, the social status of a child. By the time we wrap up, you'll see exactly why children represent true kingdom greatness, and how that single radical concept completely rewrites the rules for how we treat one another. Okay, let's dive right into the inciting incident. The disciples come up to Jesus and ask, "Who then is greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Now, to really grasp what's going on here, you've got to put yourself in the first-century Mediterranean world. This was a culture running entirely on a highly competitive honor-shame power dynamic. Social status, prestige, and rank, these were constantly being negotiated. The disciples are operating under a traditional political hierarchy. In their minds, proximity to the king equals executive power. They essentially want to know who's getting the best seats, who gets to call the shots, and who officially holds the highest rank. But instead of giving them a philosophical lecture, Jesus does something wild. He pulls a literal child right into the middle of the room. The Greek word used here is paidion. Now, we've got to correct a huge modern bias right off the bat. When we think of children today, we think of innocence, playfulness, and this kind of romanticized trust. But in first-century Greco-Roman and Jewish society, that wasn't the case at all. A child sat at the absolute bottom of the socio-economic ladder. They possessed zero social capital, zero legal standing, and zero authority. Culturally speaking, they were nobodies. So Jesus isn't using a cute object lesson here. He's using a genuinely shocking one. He is pointing to the absolute bottom of the barrel of social significance. And then he drops this absolute bombshell. Unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. The crucial word in the original Greek is strephos, which means to turn. He's not just asking them to change their minds. This implies a radical reorientation of the heart, a complete turn away from self-aggrandizing ambition. To even enter this kingdom, you have to actively surrender all your claims to status, rank, and self-sufficiency. You have to embrace the complete, desperate reliance upon God that a first-century child had to have on their guardian, simply because they had absolutely no power of their own. This is exactly why children represent true kingdom greatness, because they perfectly embody a total lack of worldly status. So what we have here is a complete collision of worldviews. On one hand, you have the world standard of power, which is all about executive authority. It's based on who you know and how close you are to the top of the food chain. On the other hand, you have kingdom greatness, which demands status-relinquishing humility. It's a total inversion. In this new community, the highest rank goes to the person who humbles themselves and gives up their rights to prestige. Humility isn't just some nice, optional personality trait in this context. It is the foundational, non-negotiable requirement of the new covenant community. From there, Jesus takes this physical child and expands the metaphor to his followers, calling them the little ones, or mikroi, meaning the vulnerable, marginalized believers within the assembly. Jesus fiercely identifies with the most socially insignificant members of the group. He actually says that to receive one of these humble, low-status believers in his name is the exact same thing as receiving him. Think about that. The king of this kingdom explicitly binds his own identity to the very people the rest of the world completely ignores. And because he identifies so closely with these vulnerable little ones, the stakes for how they are treated are astronomically high. Jesus says that causing one of these vulnerable believers to stumble is so severe, you'd be better off having a massive, heavy donkey-driven millstone hung around your neck and being drowned in the sea. He even goes on to command the radical excision of your own hand, foot, or eye if it causes sin. The hyperbole here is intense, and it's meant to show the absolute severity of exploiting the vulnerable. Jesus makes it clear, it is far better to enter physical life maimed than to keep your bodily integrity but be cast into Gehenna, that perpetually burning trash heap in the Hinnom Valley that symbolized final, eternal judgment. So why exactly is exploiting them so dangerous? Well, it comes down to the supernatural architecture of the heavenly court. Jesus says their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father. This statement is deeply anchored in the ancient divine council worldview. It reveals that the most humble, socially invisible believers, those little ones who perfectly embody the low status of a child, actually possess immediate, unmediated representation right before the throne of God himself. You literally cannot exploit them without heaven taking immediate notice. This intense protective care flows beautifully into the parable of the seeking shepherd. Imagine 99 safe sheep grazing on the mountains, and just one single wandering sheep. The shepherd leaves the 99 to go seek out the wanderer. Now, what's really fascinating here is the context. While the Gospel of Luke uses this parable to defend Jesus eating with tax collectors, the source material notes that Matthew places it squarely within the internal life of the church. It demonstrates that God's relentless promise plan refuses to accept even a 1% loss among his vulnerable flock. He actively goes after the single wanderer because it is absolutely not his will that even one of these little ones should perish. Now, obviously, offenses are gonna happen. When the harmony of the assembly is disrupted, Jesus provides a structural protocol to handle it. This is known as halakah, authoritative instruction designed for the ecclesia, the assembly. But notice what Jesus is establishing here. It is a restorative protocol. The entire process is designed exclusively for the pastoral recovery of a brother or sister. It's not about punitive expulsion. It is entirely about bringing that wandering sheep back into the fold. Let's walk through exactly how this covenantal discipline protocol works across 4 distinct steps. First, private confrontation. You go to the person alone. This protects the offender's dignity and limits public embarrassment, keeping the path to repentance wide open. If they don't listen, you move to step 2, covenantal witnesses. Bringing 1 or 2 others establishes the objective reality of the situation, a concept rooted directly in Deuteronomy. Step 3 is corporate adjudication, bringing the matter to the local assembly. And finally, if they refuse even the congregation, step 4 is to treat them as a Gentile and a tax collector. Now hold on, that is not a mandate for malicious shunning. When you look at how Jesus actually treated Gentiles and tax collectors, this step really just recategorizes the unrepentant person as a prime target for renewed evangelistic outreach and gospel restoration. To back this up, Jesus uses some highly technical rabbinic terminology: binding, or asar, and loosing, or hatar. These refer to judicial decisions made by the assembly regarding what behavior is prohibited or permitted, as well as decisions about fellowship. But here's the critical takeaway. The Greek grammar actually indicates that these authoritative decisions made on earth are reflections of judgments that have already been ratified in the heavenly court. That means the physical, local assembly's decisions carry immense cosmic weight. But think about it. How could a group of statusless little ones wield that kind of cosmic authority? It comes down to the Shekhinah. In rabbinic literature, it was taught that when 2 people study the Torah together, the divine presence, the Shekhinah, rests among them. Jesus takes that concept and guarantees the assembly's authority by making himself the locus of that divine presence. He promises that where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is right there in the midst of them. He effectively transforms the physical, local assembly into a living, mobile temple. Now, anyone who has ever been part of a community knows this stuff gets messy fast, which prompts Peter to ask a very practical, real-world question. Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Peter genuinely thinks he is being incredibly generous here, going way beyond traditional scribal benchmarks. He is wrestling with the real difficulty of church life and personal forbearance. But Jesus uses his question to introduce the stunning economics of boundless grace. Jesus responds by telling him no, not 7 times, but 77 times. The math here isn't random. It's a highly specific callback to Genesis 4, where a tyrant named Lamech boasted of boundless, unchecked violence, claiming he would take 77-fold revenge on anyone who hurt him. Jesus deliberately uses this exact phrasing to radically reverse it. He takes humanity's ancient boast of unchecked violence and retaliation and flips it into a radical mandate. His followers are to cultivate a habit of infinite, boundless forgiveness. To really hammer this mandate home, Jesus tells the parable of the unforgiving servant. And the math here is purposefully, almost comically absurd. A servant owes a king 10,000 talents. That is roughly 60 million daily wages. We're talking about an unpayable astronomical debt that exceeds the entire tax revenue of a kingdom. The king, moved with compassion, entirely forgives it as a pure grant of grace. But then, that exact same servant goes out, finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii, just 100 days' wages, and physically chokes him. He refuses to forgive it and throws the man in prison. It perfectly captures the astronomical grace of the king right alongside the petty cruelty of a servant who somehow forgot his own absolute bankruptcy. The crucial takeaway hits when the master finds out what happened and delivers a sharp rebuke. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you?
Because the servant failed to mirror the mercy he had so richly received, the master hands him over to the tormentors. This highlights a terrifying eschatological danger. Refusing to extend heart-level forgiveness to others actually forfeits your own experiential enjoyment of divine grace. Simply put, to be in this kingdom, you must mirror the mercy of the king.
Which brings us to a final, really provocative question. Are you holding on to a 100 denarii debt in a kingdom built for children? This ties the entire text together. Why do children represent true kingdom greatness? Because they inherently understand their own total lack of status, power, and wealth. When you truly grasp that you brought absolutely zero social or spiritual capital to the king, that you were completely bankrupt, and yet he freely forgave your 60 million wage debt, it shatters your pride. That status-relinquishing humility makes it literally impossible to choke your brother over 100 denarii. We are called to be a community of forgiven little ones, extending that exact same boundless grace to each other. Definitely something to deeply reflect on as you consider the relational debts in your own life. Thanks for exploring this with me, and keep seeking to understand.